The boy was dying. Veratis knew it the moment she saw him. 3 years old, pale as winter moonlight, curled in sheets that swallowed his frail body whole. His breathing came shallow and labored, each exhale a quiet surrender. The nursery smelled of herbs and desperation, that particular scent of remedies tried and failed, of hope wearing thin. She had been at Thornwood Keep for exactly 4 hours when they assigned her to him. Nobody wants the duty, Magda, the head housekeeper, had said with a grim twist of her mouth. The young heir requires constant care, feeding, bathing, changing linens when the fevers take him. It is thankless work. Veratis had not asked why it was thankless. She needed this position too badly to ask questions. A disgraced Omega with no pack, no family, no prospects. She would scrub floors with her bare hands if it meant a roof and a meal. But standing in that nursery now, watching the small chest rise and fall with such tremendous effort, she understood what Magda had left unspoken. The boy was not expected to survive. His name was Alis, son of Alpha King Corvan, heir to the Valcrest territory. And according to every healer, shaman, and mystic who had examined him, he suffered from a wasting sickness with no cure. It had begun 18 months ago as a simple fever. Now it consumed him entirely. Veratis approached the bed slowly. The child's eyes fluttered open at her footsteps, pale gray eyes startlingly alert despite the frailty of his body. "You are new," he whispered. "Yes, young prince. My name is Veratis. I will be caring for you." Alis studied her face with an intensity that seemed far too old for his years. "The others stopped coming. They think I am already dead." Her heart clenched. What kind of cruelty allowed servants to abandon a sick child? What kind of household permitted such neglect? "I am here now," she said firmly, "and I do not give up easily." A flicker of curiosity crossed those gray eyes. Not hope. He was too far gone for hope. But perhaps the faintest ember of interest in this stranger who spoke to him like he mattered. She spent that first day learning his routines, the medications that no longer worked, the broths he could barely swallow, the way his body trembled when the chills took him, and the way he cried silently when the pain grew too sharp. She learned that his mother, Luna Lisette, had died giving birth to him. She learned that his father, the Alpha King, had not visited the nursery in over 3 months. She learned that Alis, heir to one of the most powerful territories in the realm, was utterly alone. That night, while the keep fell silent and the guards changed shifts beneath a cloud-covered moon, Veratis sat beside his bed and did what none of the previous caretakers had bothered to do. She touched him. Not a clinical touch, not the detached handling of a body being turned to prevent sores. She placed her hand gently on his forehead, smoothing back the damp hair that clung to his feverish skin. "Rest now, little one," she murmured. "I am watching over you." Alis sighed, a tiny sound of relief, and his tense muscles relaxed for the first time all day. In his sleep, the boy's form began to shimmer, a common occurrence among young wolves whose control over their shifting remained incomplete. His body flickered between human child and wolf pup, the transformation unstable and involuntary, and that was when she saw it. In his pup form, hidden beneath the soft silver fur at the nape of his neck, a pattern of black lines spread across his skin like veins of corruption. They pulsed faintly, almost imperceptibly, in rhythm with his tiny heartbeat. When he shifted back to human form, the marks became nearly invisible. Just faint shadows that any healer would dismiss as bruising or poor circulation. But in his fur, the curse revealed itself fully. Veratis's wolf stirred sharply inside her, hackles rising at the scent of malice that had no earthly source. She recognized that dark energy. She had encountered it only once before, many years ago in a village far from here. A death hex wrapped in shadow and spite. Alis was not sick. He was cursed. Someone had laid a death working on the Alpha King's heir, a slow, insidious magic designed to drain his life force drop by drop until nothing remained. And in 18 months of examinations, not a single healer had discovered it. Veratis pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle her gasp. She knew she should report this immediately. Run to the Alpha King himself and reveal what she had found. But even as the thought formed, a cold voice of reason whispered caution. Someone in this keep had cursed a child. Someone with access to the air, with knowledge of dark magic, with motive to see him dead. That someone could be anyone, a servant, a guard, a member of the king's own council. If she revealed her discovery to the wrong person, she would be silenced, disposed of, and Alis would die with no one left to save him. No. She needed to be clever about this. She needed to understand what she was dealing with before she made any move. Veratis looked down at the sleeping boy, at the gentle rise and fall of his cursed chest, and made a silent vow. She would find whoever did this, and she would make them pay. For 3 days, Veratis watched. She watched the servants who brought linens and avoided looking at the dying prince. She watched the healers who checked his pulse with perfunctory disinterest, already certain of his fate. She watched the guards who patrolled the corridor outside his nursery, their eyes sliding past his door as though it were already a tomb. No one cared about Alis. That much was devastatingly clear. His death had been accepted as inevitable, mourned in advance, and now the entire household simply waited for the formality of his final breath. It made her sick, but it also made her invisible. No one questioned the new maid who spent long hours at the young heir's bedside. No one thought it strange that she studied his symptoms with such intensity, or that she requested books on childhood ailments from the keep's library. What she actually read, hidden behind covers of innocent medical texts, were volumes on curse-breaking she had smuggled from the restricted archives. Veratis had secrets of her own. Her mother had been a seer, a woman blessed and burdened with the ability to glimpse the threads of fate. That gift had skipped Veratis entirely, but a different power had passed to her instead. A sensitivity to magic, an ability to feel its presence, to sense its texture, to taste its intent on the air. It was this ability that had gotten her cast out of her birth pack. The Alpha had feared what he did not understand, and her own parents had been too weak to protect her. She had been 16 when they drove her into the wilderness with nothing but the clothes on her back. 12 years of survival had taught her many things: how to hide her nature, how to appear ordinary, how to keep her head down and her instincts sharp. But nothing had prepared her for the curse coiled around young Alis. It was masterwork, far beyond anything she had encountered before. Layered and complex, anchored to the boy through multiple binding points, designed to resist detection and removal. Whoever had crafted this hex was either extraordinarily powerful or extraordinarily patient, possibly both. On the 4th day, she made her first attempt at intervention. While Alis slept, she laid her hands on his chest and reached with her senses toward the dark threads woven through his spirit. Pain lanced through her instantly. The curse fought back, recognizing the threat, snapping at her consciousness like a rabid animal. She barely managed to withdraw before it could sink its teeth into her own essence. Clever, she breathed, wiping sweat from her brow. Very clever. The hex was self-defending. Any attempt to remove it would trigger a violent backlash, likely killing both Alis and whoever tried to break the working. No wonder the healers had found nothing. Their gentle probing would have slid right past the curse's defenses, while any aggressive magical examination would have been met with lethal force. Veratis needed a different approach. She needed to find the source, the anchor point, the object or ritual that had originally laid the curse. Destroying that might unravel the working without triggering its defenses, which meant she needed to investigate far beyond the nursery walls. She began with questions, subtle ones, dropped into conversations with other servants during meals and shift changes. How had the young prince's illness begun? Who had been present when the first symptoms appeared? Had anything unusual happened in the keep around that time? The answers painted a troubling picture. Aelis's decline had started when he was 18 months old, shortly after his father had emerged from the deepest fog of his mourning. The king had been distant and distracted, drowning his grief in territorial disputes and council meetings. The infant prince had been left almost entirely in the care of a wet nurse named Brida, who had mysteriously disappeared from the keep 2 weeks after Aelis's first fever. No one knew where Brida had gone. Some said she had fled, unable to bear the guilt of failing to protect her charge. Others whispered that she had met a darker fate. Viratus suspected the truth was uglier than either tale. On the 5th night, she made a decision that could cost her everything. She broke into the West Wing archives. The keep was old, built centuries ago by the first Alpha of Valcrest, and its records stretched back generations. Somewhere in those dusty shelves lay the truth she needed. Birth records, death records, employment logs, any scrap of information that might point toward Brida's true identity or her connection to the curse. The halls were empty at this hour, the servants asleep and the guards concentrated around the king's chambers in the eastern tower. Viratus moved like a shadow, her omega nature granting her a lightness of step and a muted scent that made her nearly undetectable. The archive door was locked, but the mechanism was old. A bent hairpin and 30 seconds of patient manipulation granted her entry. Inside, dust motes swirled in the moonlight streaming through high windows. Rows of shelves stretched into darkness, laden with ledgers and scrolls and bound volumes thick with the weight of history. Viratis worked quickly, pulling employment records from the year of Aelis's birth. She found Brida's entry almost immediately. A brief notation indicating she had been hired as a wet nurse upon Luna Lisette's death. But the handwriting caught her attention. It was not the steward's careful script. It was looser, more hurried, as though the entry had been added hastily by someone else entirely. And beside Brida's name, in ink so faint it was nearly invisible, someone had added a single symbol, a crescent moon pierced by a thorn. Viratis's blood turned to ice. She knew that mark. Every wolf in the southern territories knew it. The sigil of the Ravenmoor witches, a coven that had been destroyed over 20 years ago for practicing blood magic and dark hexcraft. Someone had placed a Ravenmoor witch in the Alpha King's household. Someone with the power to manipulate records, to bypass security, to orchestrate an assassination that would unfold so slowly no one would ever suspect murder. Who had that kind of access? Who hated the Alpha King, or his heir, enough to employ such forbidden magic? A sound echoed from somewhere deep in the archive. Footsteps, approaching. Viratis shoved the ledger back onto its shelf and dove behind a row of crates, just as a door creaked open at the far end of the room. Torchlight spilled across the floor, casting long shadows. And then a voice. Female, cold, terrifyingly familiar, spoke into the darkness. I know you are here, little mouse. I can smell your fear. Viratis pressed herself against the cold stone wall, heart hammering so loudly she was certain it would betray her. The torchlight swept closer, licking at the edges of her hiding place. There is no point in running. The voice was silk wrapped around a blade. This archive has only one door, and I am standing in front of it. Slowly, with the calm of someone who knew when the game was lost, Viratis rose from behind the crates. The woman holding the torch was stunning. Tall and imperious, with hair like burnished copper cascading over shoulders draped in midnight silk. Her eyes were pale green, sharp as broken glass, and they studied Viratis with the detached interest of a cat examining a wounded bird. Viratis recognized her instantly. Seraphine, the Alpha King's sister by marriage, widow of his younger brother, who had died in a border skirmish 5 years past. She held no official position in the household, yet she moved through Thornwood Keep as though she owned every stone. The new maid, Seraphine said, tilting her head. The one who has taken such devoted interest in my poor nephew. I am only doing my duty, Lady Seraphine. Your duty. A smile curved those perfect lips, a smile that contained no warmth whatsoever. Is it your duty to break into restricted archives in the dead of night? To rifle through employment records that are none of your concern? Veratis said nothing. Any excuse she offered would only condemn her further. Seraphine stepped closer, the torchlight dancing across her angular features. I have been watching you, little Omega. From the moment you arrived, your presence felt wrong, too observant, too purposeful. The other servants shuffle through their days like sleepwalkers. But you have the eyes of someone searching for answers. I was curious about the prince's illness, Veratis said carefully. Nothing more. Lies taste like ash on my tongue. Did you know that? Seraphine reached out and caught Veratis's chin, forcing their eyes to meet. I can always tell when someone is being dishonest with me. It is a useful gift in a place like this. The touch sent a shiver of revulsion down Veratis's spine. Not just from fear, but from recognition. This close, she could sense it. The faint residue of dark magic clinging to Seraphine like perfume. The same oily wrongness that pulsed through Aelis's veins. Seraphine was the source. Seraphine had laid the curse. The realization must have shown in her expression, because Seraphine's smile widened. Ah, there it is. Understanding. She released Veratis's chin and took a step back, her posture shifting from predator to conversational. You found the marks on him, did you not? The little black threads I wove so carefully beneath his fur? Veratis's hands curled into fists. He is a child. An innocent child. He is an obstacle. Seraphine's voice hardened, a squalling inconvenience standing between this territory and its rightful future. Do you think Corvin deserves to rule? A man so blinded by grief over his dead wife that he cannot see the rot spreading through his own house? And you would rule better? Seraphine laughed, a bright, brittle sound. I would rule smarter. With Aelis gone and Corvin drowning in his failure, the council will have no choice but to seek alternative leadership. My late husband's bloodline carries just as much legitimacy as Corvin's. All I need is for the current heir to fade away quietly, and the path clears itself. The healers will eventually discover the truth. Will they? They have had 18 months, and none of them have found so much as a whisper. Seraphine spread her hands. That is the beauty of Ravenmoor craft. It mimics natural decay so perfectly that even the most gifted shamans see only what I want them to see. The curse hides in his wolf form, visible only when he shifts. And who examines a dying child's fur for dark magic? Veratis's mind raced. Seraphine was confessing openly, which meant she had no intention of letting Veratis leave this archive alive. The question was whether to fight, flee, or stall for time. The wet nurse, Veratis said, grasping for anything that might extend the conversation. Brita, she was one of yours? A flicker of irritation crossed Seraphine's face. Brita was a disappointment. She laid the initial working beautifully, but then she developed a conscience. Started talking about confessing, clearing her soul before the gods. Seraphine's lip curled. I had to silence her before she ruined everything. You killed her. I disposed of a liability. There is a difference. Veratis's wolf surged within her, howling for blood. This woman had murdered an innocent, cursed a child, and plotted the destruction of an entire bloodline. And she spoke of it as casually as discussing the weather. You ask why I would do such things, Seraphine continued, reading the horror on Veratis's face. Let me tell you about Lisette. Beautiful, brilliant Lisette. We were closer than sisters once. She confided everything in me, and I in her. I loved her more than I have ever loved anyone, and when my husband died, I thought perhaps finally, we could be together as I had always dreamed. Her voice turned bitter. But she chose Corvin instead, barely waited 6 months before throwing herself at him. She said she wanted to live again, to be happy, as though my love was not enough to give her those things. She married him, bore his child, and died before I could make her understand what she had thrown away. Veratis understood now. This was not merely about power or succession. This was obsession. Grief twisted into something monstrous. Lisette is gone, Veratis said quietly. Killing her son will not bring her back or change her choice. No, but it will make Corvin suffer as I have suffered. He took everything from me, so I will take everything from him. Seraphine drew a dagger from the folds of her gown, its blade etched with symbols that seemed to writhe in the torchlight. Whatever you are, and I suspect you are far more than a simple Omega, you are alone, unarmed, and trapped. No one will find your body until spring cleaning, if ever. She lunged, but Veratis had been fighting for survival since she was 16 years old. Her body moved before her mind could catch up, twisting sideways to avoid the blade and driving her elbow into Seraphine's ribs. The noblewoman gasped, stumbling. The torch fell from her grasp and rolled across the floor, casting wild shadows. Veratis did not wait. She ran. The archive door loomed ahead, still open from Seraphine's entrance. She burst through it and into the corridor beyond, bare feet slapping against cold stone. Behind her, she heard Seraphine's furious scream, followed by words in a language that made Veratis's ears ring with wrongness. A spell. She was casting a spell. Veratis threw herself around a corner just as a bolt of dark energy shot past her head, scorching the wall where she had been standing a heartbeat before. She kept running. Through the west wing, past the empty great hall, toward the one place she might find sanctuary, the Alpha King's chambers. The guards at Corvin's door barely had time to register her approach before she was upon them, gasping and wild-eyed. "I need to see the king," she panted. "Now! It concerns his son." "The king does not receive visitors at this hour," one guard said flatly. "Then tell him the heir is dying because someone in his household cursed him with Ravenmoor blood magic. And I know who did it." The guards exchanged glances. A heartbeat later, the door swung open. And Veratis found herself face to face with Alpha King Corvin for the first time. He was not what she expected. The stories painted him as a tyrant, cold and merciless. But the man standing before her looked exhausted, haunted. His dark hair was streaked with gray, his jaw shadowed with stubble, and his eyes, deep amber, flecked with gold, held a weariness that went far beyond sleepless nights. "Speak," he commanded. "And pray, your words are worth my time." Before Veratis could respond, a voice rang out from the far end of the corridor. "Do not listen to her, brother. She is a spy sent to destabilize our territory." Seraphine emerged from the shadows, composed once more, not a hair out of place. Only the slight flush in her cheeks betrayed the confrontation in the archive. Corvin's gaze flicked between the two women. "One of you," he said slowly, "is lying to me." The air grew thick with tension. Seraphine smiled serenely. Veratis stood her ground, pulse racing. And in the nursery 2 floors above, young Alis began to scream. The scream tore through the keep like a blade through silk. Every head turned, every guard tensed, and Veratis felt her blood turn to ice because she recognized that sound. The raw, animal agony of a child whose body was being devoured from within. The curse was accelerating. "Alis," Corvin breathed, and for one instant the mask of the cold Alpha King shattered completely. Beneath it was a father, terrified and helpless. Then he was moving, running toward the nursery with a speed that left his guards scrambling to follow. Veratis ran too, ignoring Seraphine's sharp command to stop, ignoring everything except the desperate need to reach the boy before it was too late. The nursery door hung open when they arrived. Inside, chaos reigned. 2 night servants cowered against the far wall, their faces pale with horror. The healer on duty knelt beside the bed, hands trembling as he tried to hold Alis still. But the child was convulsing. His small body arched and twisted, limbs jerking in patterns that no natural seizure could produce. He flickered between forms. Boy and wolf pup, boy and wolf pup. His unstable shifting revealing the full horror of the curse. Black veins had erupted across his skin and fur alike, visible now even to those without magical sight. Dark threads pulsing beneath flesh that had turned the color of old parchment. What is happening? Corvin roared, seizing the healer by the collar. What have you done? Nothing, Alpha, I swear. He simply began screaming, and then the marks appeared. Veratus pushed past them both and reached the bed. The curse was fully active now, its defenses lowered in the frenzy of its feeding. She could see it clearly. A web of malevolent energy wrapped around Aelis's spirit, squeezing tighter with every passing second. Seraphine had triggered it. The moment she realized her secret was exposed, she had accelerated the working. Better to kill the boy quickly than risk the curse being discovered and traced back to her. Move aside, Veratus commanded, shoving the healer away. Who do you think you are? He sputtered. She did not answer. There was no time for explanations, no time for politics or protocol. She placed both hands on Aelis's chest and reached with every ounce of her gift. The curse snapped at her immediately, recognizing the intrusion. Pain exploded behind her eyes, hot, blinding, like molten iron poured directly into her skull. She heard someone screaming and realized distantly that it was her own voice. But she did not let go. She could feel the anchor now, the central thread that held the entire working together. It was not inside Aelis. It was somewhere else, somewhere close, an object that had been used to bind the curse to his blood. She followed the thread with her mind, tracing its path through walls and floors, down through the keep's ancient foundations until, there, hidden beneath the stones of the wine cellar, a small clay figure molded in the shape of a wolf pup wrapped in a lock of infant hair. The cellar, she gasped, wrenching herself free from the curse's grip. Blood streamed from her nose and her vision swam with dark spots. There is an object in the wine cellar, a clay figure. That is the anchor. Destroy it, and the curse breaks. Corvin stared at her with an expression she could not read. Shock? Disbelief? Hope? How do you know this? He demanded. Because I can see it. I have always been able to see such things. She met his gaze without flinching. Your son is not sick, Alpha. He was cursed when he was 18 months old. And the woman who did it is standing in this room. Every eye turned to Seraphine. The noblewoman stood in the doorway, her beautiful face arranged in an expression of wounded innocence. You cannot possibly believe this madness. She is clearly deranged. Some hedge witch peddling fantasies to save herself from punishment. Then you will not mind if we search the cellar, Corvin said quietly. Unease flickered in Seraphine's pale green eyes. Fear? Calculation? It vanished too quickly to identify. Search wherever you wish. You will find nothing but cobwebs and old vintages. Corvin jerked his head at two of his guards. Go. Now. Bring me whatever you find beneath the stones. The guards departed at a run. Silence descended over the nursery, broken only by Aelis's labored breathing. The convulsions had stopped, but the black veins remained pulsing with malevolent rhythm. Veratus knelt beside the bed, one hand resting on the boy's forehead. She could feel the curse straining against its bonds, eager to complete its work. They had minutes at best. Hold on, she whispered. Just a little longer, little prince. Aelis's eyes fluttered open, gray and glassy but somehow still aware. It hurts, he breathed. I know it does. But we are going to make it stop. Seraphine laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. This is absurd theater. When your guards return empty-handed, I expect a full apology. And I expect this woman to be executed for her accusations against a member of the royal family. If they return empty-handed, Corvin said, you will have your apology. The minutes stretched like hours. Veratus kept her hand on Aelis, feeding him tiny threads of her own energy to keep the curse at bay. It was like trying to hold back a flood with cupped hands, desperate, exhausting, ultimately futile. But she refused to stop. Finally, footsteps thundered in the corridor. The guards burst through the door, and one of them held aloft in his gloved hand a clay figure, wolf-shaped, wrapped in a lock of golden hair that matched Aelis's perfectly. The color drained from Seraphine's face. "That proves nothing," she said, but her voice had lost its smoothness. "Anyone could have placed that there. This Omega is clearly trying to frame me for—" "The figure was beneath a stone marked with your personal seal," the guard interrupted. "The one you use on your private correspondence." Silence. Corvin turned to face his sister-in-law, and the grief and exhaustion in his expression had been replaced by cold, focused rage. The fury of an alpha whose pack had been violated from within. "You," he said softly. "You did this." Seraphine's composure shattered. "He should never have been born. Lisette was supposed to be mine. We were going to leave together, start a new life far from this wretched territory. But then your brother died, and she chose you instead of waiting for me. She promised we would be together. And then she broke that promise for a crown and a throne." "She never spoke of such plans," Corvin said, his voice dangerous. "Because she was ashamed. She knew the pack would never accept us, so she hid her feelings, even from herself in the end. And when she died giving birth to that worthless whelp, I lost any chance of ever making her remember what we had." Tears streamed down Seraphine's face, but there was no sanity left in her eyes. "So I decided to take something from you. Let you watch your precious heir wither away, just as I withered in the shadows of your perfect little family." Veratus rose from the bedside. "The figure. We need to destroy it now, before the curse completes its work." Corvin took the clay wolf from his guard's hand. For a moment, he simply stared at it. This small, innocuous object that had been slowly murdering his son for 18 months. Then he threw it into the nursery fireplace. The flames roared, turning green, then black, then white. Seraphine screamed as though she herself were burning. And on the bed, Alis gasped as the black veins beneath his skin began to fade. The curse was breaking. The process was not instant. Veratus had hoped the curse would simply dissolve once its anchor was destroyed, but dark magic rarely released its victims so easily. For 3 days, Alis drifted in and out of consciousness, while his body fought to purge the remnants of the hex. Veratus never left his side. She slept in a chair beside his bed, ate only when the other servants forced food into her hands, and spent every waking moment monitoring the fragments of corruption still clinging to his spirit. They were dissolving slowly, like ice melting in spring, but the process was agonizing to watch. On the second day, Corvin came to the nursery. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her work. She felt his gaze on her back but did not turn. Alis needed her attention more than the Alpha King did. "You saved him," Corvin said finally. "He is not saved yet. The curse damaged his spirit. It will take time to heal." "But he will heal." Veratis paused, considering her words carefully. "Yes, I believe he will. Children are resilient and his wolf spirit is strong. He has been fighting this poison for 18 months. Now that the source is gone, his own nature will do the rest." Corvin moved further into the room, his footsteps heavy. Up close, he looked worse than before. Dark circles beneath his eyes, his powerful frame somehow diminished by the weight of recent revelations. "I abandoned him," he said quietly. "My own son. I could not bear to watch him fade, so I stopped visiting, stopped holding him, stopped being his father." His voice cracked. "What kind of alpha does that?" Veratis finally turned to face him. "A grieving one. You lost your mate, and then you believed you were losing your child. The pain must have been unbearable. That is not an excuse." "No, it is not." She held his gaze without flinching. "But it is an explanation. And explanations matter because they show us where we went wrong. You cannot change the past 18 months, but you can change what happens next." Corvin looked at his son, truly looked, perhaps for the first time since the illness began. Alis lay peaceful now, his breathing steady, his color slowly returning. A small boy who had endured unimaginable suffering without anyone to comfort him. I do not know how to be a father, Corvin admitted. Lisette was supposed to teach me. She was supposed to be here. Then learn, Verades said simply. He is 3 years old. He will not remember these dark months when he grows older. What he will remember is what comes after. The choice is yours. A crack appeared in Corvin's carefully constructed walls. The defenses he had erected against further pain began to crumble, just slightly. He crossed to the bed and carefully, as though handling something infinitely precious, lifted his son into his arms. Alis stirred, his gray eyes opened, focusing slowly on the face above him. "Father," he whispered. "I am here." Corvin's voice was rough with emotion. "I am here, and I am not leaving again. I swear it." Alis's small hand reached up and touched his father's cheek. "You came back." "I did. And I am so sorry it took me so long." Verades turned away, giving them privacy. Her throat was tight with feelings she did not want to examine too closely. This was not her family, not her moment. She was just a servant who had stumbled into a tragedy and done what needed to be done. But as she moved toward the door, Corvin's voice stopped her. "Where do you think you are going?" She turned. "I assumed you would want time alone with your son." "What I want," Corvin said slowly, "is to understand who you are. You see curses that trained shamans cannot detect. You broke a Ravenmoor hex with nothing but your bare hands. You are clearly not an ordinary Omega." He settled Alis back onto the pillows and faced her fully. "So I will ask you plainly. What are you?" Verades hesitated. She had spent 12 years hiding her nature, burying the truth beneath layers of deception. Revealing herself to an Alpha King could go very badly. But he had trusted her with his son. Perhaps she could trust him with this. "My mother was a seer," she said. "I did not inherit her visions, but I inherited a different gift. The ability to perceive magic, to sense its presence and intent. Some might call it a blessing. My birth pack called it an abomination." "They cast you out?" "When I was 16. I have been surviving alone ever since." Corvin studied her with those intense amber eyes. She could not read his expression. Alpha Kings were trained to keep their thoughts hidden. "You risked your life for a child you had known only days," he said. "You stood against a noblewoman who could have had you killed with a word. You defied every instinct for self-preservation to do what was right." He paused. "That is not the behavior of an abomination. That is the behavior of someone with extraordinary courage." Verades did not know how to respond. She had been called many things over the years. Freak, witch, monster. Courage had never been among them. "My son will need continued care," Corvin continued. "Someone to monitor his recovery. Someone who can detect any lingering traces of the curse." He tilted his head. "Would you be willing to stay? As a maid? As his guardian, with full authority over his well-being and a position in my household that reflects the service you have rendered." He met her gaze. "I am asking you to help me raise my heir, Verades. Will you accept?" The offer stunned her. A position of honor in an Alpha King's household. Security. Purpose. Everything she had spent 12 years dreaming of and never daring to hope for. And yet, apprehension held her back. "Seraphine," she said, "what will happen to her?" Corvin's expression darkened. "She is being held in the cells beneath the keep. Her trial begins tomorrow. The punishment for cursing a member of the royal bloodline is death." She mentioned others. Implied there were more involved in the plot. "We are investigating. So far we have found no evidence of accomplices." Verades frowned. That did not feel right. Seraphine was cunning, but the scope of this conspiracy, the placement of a Ravenmoor witch, the manipulation of records, the 18 months of successful concealment, suggested resources beyond what a single bitter noblewoman could command. "Something troubles you," Corvin observed. "It feels incomplete. Too easy." "Easy?" His brow lifted. "My son nearly died. A woman I trusted as family turned out to be a murderer. Nothing about this feels easy to me. I mean, the resolution feels too neat. Seraphine confessed publicly. She incriminated herself rather than maintaining her innocence, almost as though the realization hit her like a physical blow. As though she wanted to be caught. Veratis finished slowly. She accelerated the curse the moment she saw me in the archive. She could have killed me quietly and maintained her cover. Instead, she confronted me directly, practically goaded me into fleeing to you. Corvin's eyes narrowed. You think she is protecting someone. I think she is a decoy, a willing sacrifice to draw attention away from the true architect of this plot. Before Corvin could respond, a guard burst through the nursery door, his face ashen. Alpha! It is Lady Seraphine. She has escaped. The cells beneath Thornwood Keep had stood for 4 centuries. Their walls were solid granite, their bars forged from iron infused with wolfsbane to prevent shifting. In all that time, no prisoner had ever escaped. Until now. Veratis stood in Seraphine's empty cell, studying the scene with growing unease. The bars remained intact. The lock showed no signs of tampering. The guards posted outside the cell blocks swore they had heard nothing, seen nothing. The only clue was a faint residue of magic clinging to the stones, dark and slippery, making Veratis's skin crawl. She did not escape, Veratis said quietly. She was taken. Corvin stood beside her, his jaw tight with barely contained fury. Taken by whom? Someone powerful enough to bypass your wards, someone with access to magics beyond ordinary witchcraft. She crouched down, touching the floor where the residue was strongest. Her gift flared, and fragments of intent brushed against her consciousness. Purpose, retrieval, relocation. A summoning ritual. Someone called her to them through the veil between spaces. Is such a thing possible? I would have said no until tonight. Veratis rose, wiping her hand against her dress as though the magic had left a physical stain. Whoever your true enemy is, they command resources I have never encountered before. Corvin was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had taken on a dangerous edge. What do we know? What can we deduce from the evidence? Veratis appreciated his approach. Methodical, analytical, despite the rage clearly simmering beneath his surface. A leader who could think clearly in crisis was rare. The curse was Ravenmoor craft, she said. That coven was destroyed 2 decades ago, but clearly some knowledge survived. Either Seraphine learned their techniques herself, or she had help from someone who preserved the old ways. The witches were executed by my father, Corvin said. He led the purge himself after they were caught performing blood sacrifices in the southern territories. All of them? He hesitated. There were rumors that some escaped. Children, mostly. The youngest members of the coven who might have been hidden by sympathizers. Children who would now be adults. Adults who might harbor considerable resentment toward the Valcrest bloodline. The implications settled over them like a shroud. This was not simply a bitter sister-in-law seeking revenge. This was older, deeper, a generational vendetta that had finally found its moment to strike. Alis is still in danger, Veratis said. If the true enemy remains free, they may try again. Then we must find them before they do. With respect, Alpha, we know almost nothing about who we are facing. Seraphine was our only lead, and she has vanished. We cannot fight an enemy we cannot see. Corvin turned to face her fully. Then help me see them. You have abilities that no one else in my household possesses. You found the curse when every healer failed. You traced it to its anchor when all seemed lost. He stepped closer, and Veratis was suddenly aware of his presence in a way she had not been before. The heat radiating from his body, the intensity in his amber eyes. Stay. Help me protect my son and hunt down whoever threatens him. Name your price, and it is yours. Her price. As though she could put a value on the chance to truly belong somewhere. To use her gift for meaning instead of hiding it in shame. I want answers, she said. About my own past. My mother died when I was young, and my father refused to speak of her abilities or where they came from. If I am to help you face this enemy, I need to understand my own nature. Your archives are extensive. I want access to them. Done. And I want protection. Not guards, but legal standing. If anything happens to you, I need assurance that I will not be cast out again by whoever succeeds you. Corvin nodded slowly. I can grant you status as a ward of the crown. It would place you under the direct protection of the throne, regardless of who sits upon it. It was more than she had dared hope for. Then I accept your offer. Relief softened Corvin's expression. Perhaps even gratitude. Thank you, Veridis. Do not thank me yet. We have no idea what we are truly facing. They left the cells together and climbed back through the keep to the nursery, where Alis slept peacefully under the watchful eyes of 4 trusted guards. The black veins had faded completely now, leaving his skin pale but unmarked. He looked almost healthy, a dramatic change from the dying child she had met less than a week ago. Veridis settled into her chair beside his bed, and Corvin took a seat across from her. For a while, neither spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable. Rather, it felt like a necessary pause, a moment to breathe before the next storm. Tell me about Luna Lisette, Veridis said finally. Not as a Luna, as a person. Corvin's expression softened. She was stubborn, brilliant. She could argue anyone into submission and make them thank her for it afterward. She hated formal ceremonies and loved riding through the forest at dawn. She collected bird feathers and pressed flowers and kept them in journals that she would never let anyone read. You loved her? More than I thought possible. He paused. My brother loved her first. They were betrothed from childhood. When he died in the border war, I expected her to retreat into mourning forever. Instead, she came to me 6 months later and announced that she was done grieving and intended to live fully again. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. She said that my brother would have wanted her to be happy, and she had decided that I was her best chance at happiness. I did not have the strength to argue with her. And Seraphine's claims? About Lisette promising to leave with her? Corvin's jaw tightened. Lisette never mentioned any such thing to me. But Seraphine was her closest friend for years. It is possible there were feelings I knew nothing about. Or that Seraphine interpreted friendship as something more. Either way, it does not excuse what she did. No, it does not. Corvin leaned back in his chair, studying her. You are wise for someone so young. I am 28. Hardly young. Young compared to me. I will be 43 this winter. She had not asked his age, but the number surprised her. He looked older in some ways, weathered by grief and responsibility. Yet in the dim light of the nursery, with his guard lowered, she could see traces of the man he might have been before life demanded so much of him. What happens now? She asked. Now we prepare. I will send scouts to the southern territories, searching for any trace of surviving Ravenmoor sympathizers. I will strengthen the wards around the keep and double the guard on Alis. And you... He met her eyes. You will begin your research. Learn everything you can about your gift and how it might help us. And if the enemy strikes before we are ready? Corvin's jaw tightened. Then we fight with whatever we have. My son will not fall. Not now. Not ever. Outside the nursery window, dawn was breaking over the mountains. Rose and gold light spilled across the peaks, banishing the darkness that had seemed so absolute just hours ago. A new day, a new beginning. But somewhere in the shadows, Veridis knew their true enemy was watching. Waiting. Planning the next move in a game that had been playing out long before she arrived at Thornwood Keep. The curse on Alis was broken, but the war was just beginning. 3 weeks passed. Alis grew stronger with each day, his body recovering with the remarkable resilience that only children possess. The pallor faded from his cheeks, replaced by healthy color. His appetite returned. He began to laugh again, a sound so foreign to the nursery that the servants wept the first time they heard it. Veratis watched his transformation with quiet satisfaction. The curse had left no permanent damage to his spirit, though she continued to monitor him carefully for any lingering traces of corruption. There were none. Whatever darkness had gripped him for 18 months was truly gone. But her relief was tempered by constant vigilance. The scouts Corvin had dispatched to the southern territories returned with troubling reports. Whispers of a growing movement among those who remembered the Ravenmoor Coven, symbols appearing on trees and stones throughout the borderlands. The crescent moon pierced by a thorn. Someone was recruiting, someone was organizing, and Seraphine remained unfound. She could be anywhere by now, Corvin said one evening, pacing the length of his study while Veratis reviewed the scout reports. Across the sea, in the northern wastes, the summoning magic you described could have transported her anywhere in the realm. Or she could be much closer than we think, Veratis countered, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to strike again. A comforting thought. She heard the exhaustion in his voice. 3 weeks of heightened security, sleepless nights, and the constant pressure of an invisible threat had taken their toll. Even an Alpha King had limits. You need rest, she said. I will rest when my son is safe. Your son is safe. The wards are strong, the guards are vigilant, and I am watching over him every night. What threatens him now is having a father who collapses from exhaustion. Corvin stopped pacing and turned to face her. In the firelight, his amber eyes held vulnerability, the weariness that comes from carrying burdens alone for too long. You speak to me as though I were an ordinary man, he said. Not an alpha, not a king. Would you prefer empty deference? No. A faint smile tugged at his lips. It is refreshing. Terrifying, but refreshing. Veratis set down the reports and rose from her chair. Then accept my counsel and sleep. I will wake you if anything requires your attention. For a moment she thought he would argue. Alphas were not accustomed to taking orders, especially from Omegas, but her expression must have convinced him because he finally nodded. 4 hours, he said. No more. We will see. He left the study and Veratis returned to the reports, searching for patterns in the chaos of information. The Ravenmoor symbols, the whispered recruitment, the growing unrest in territories that had been peaceful for decades. It was all connected. She could feel it in her bones, a vast web of conspiracy stretching far beyond Seraphine's personal vendetta. The curse on Alis had been just one thread in a much larger tapestry. But who was weaving it? And what did they ultimately want? The answers eluded her, dancing just beyond the edge of comprehension. Around midnight, she made her way to the nursery for her nightly vigil. The guards nodded as she passed, their respect evident in their posture. Word of her role in saving the young prince had spread throughout the keep, transforming her from anonymous maid to figure of quiet authority. It still felt strange. After 12 years of invisibility, being seen was an adjustment. Alis was awake when she entered, sitting up in bed with a book of illustrated fables spread across his lap. His gray eyes brightened at her appearance. Veratis, will you read to me? It is late, little prince. You should be sleeping. I cannot sleep. My head is too full of thoughts. She smiled despite herself and settled into the chair beside his bed. What thoughts trouble you? Alis considered the question with the seriousness that seemed characteristic of him. I dreamed about the darkness, the thing that was inside me. It spoke to me sometimes, when the pain was very bad. It said I was going to die, and no one would remember me. Veratis's heart clenched. That was the curse talking. It wanted you to give up. But I did not give up. I kept waiting for someone to come. He looked at her with those ancient eyes. And then you came. I am glad I did. Will you stay forever? The question caught her off guard. Children asked such things innocently without understanding the weight of forever. But Alis's expression suggested he understood more than most children his age. I will stay as long as you need me, she said carefully. What if I always need you? Veratis reached out and smoothed the hair back from his forehead. The same gesture she had used on her first night in the nursery when she had discovered the curse lurking beneath his fur. "Then I will always be here." Alis smiled. A real smile, full of trust and warmth. And a wall inside Veratis crumbled. She had spent so long protecting herself, keeping others at a distance, refusing to form attachments that could be used against her. But this boy had slipped past her defenses without even trying. She cared about him. Genuinely, deeply cared. It was terrifying and wonderful. "Now," she said, picking up the book of fables. "Shall I read to you until you fall asleep?" He nodded eagerly and snuggled down into his pillows. Veratis began to read, her voice soft in the candlelit room. The story was about a clever fox who outsmarted a cruel wolf king, and Alis listened with rapt attention until his eyes grew heavy and his breathing slowed. When she was certain he was asleep, she closed the book and sat in silence, watching over him as she had promised. Outside the window, the moon hung full and bright over the mountains, the same moon that had witnessed the Ravenmoor covens rise and fall. The same moon that now illuminated whatever shadow conspiracy was gathering strength in the forgotten corners of the realm. War was coming. Veratis could feel it in the currents of magic that flowed through the world, a gathering storm that would break over Valcrest territory sooner rather than later. But tonight, in this nursery, there was peace. A boy who had been dying was now healing. A father who had been lost was finding his way back. And an Omega who had spent her life running had finally found a place to stand. The door creaked softly, and Veratis turned to find Corvin standing in the entrance. He had not slept. She could see that much in the tension that still lined his shoulders. But there was a different quality to his presence now, softer, more human. "I could not stay away," he admitted quietly, moving to stand beside her chair. His eyes fell on his sleeping son, and the hard lines of his face gentled. "I have missed so much, so many moments I can never get back." "Then do not miss any more." He looked at her then, really looked, as though seeing her for the first time. "You have given me back my son. You have given me back my purpose. How can I ever repay such a debt?" "There is no debt," Veratis said. "I did what was right. That is payment enough. Most people would ask for gold, land, power. I am not most people." Corvin smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his weathered features into something almost handsome. "No. You are certainly not." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching Alis sleep. The candles flickered. The guards changed shifts in the corridor beyond, and somewhere in the darkness beyond the mountains, their enemies plotted and schemed. But in this moment, none of that mattered. Veratis had spent her entire adult life searching for a place where she belonged. A home, a purpose, a reason to stop running. She had found it in the most unlikely of places: a dying prince's nursery, a haunted king's keep, a territory threatened by shadows she did not yet understand. The curse was broken. The boy was saved. And against all odds, Veratis had found something she had stopped believing in long ago: hope. The road ahead would be dangerous. The enemy was still out there, growing stronger, preparing for a confrontation that could reshape the entire realm. Veratis knew this with absolute certainty. But she also knew that she would not face it alone. She had a prince to protect, a king who was learning to trust again, and a gift that might be the only weapon capable of piercing the darkness to come. Whatever happened next, she was ready. The Alpha King's pup had grown weaker every day until a new maid found the dark curse hidden in his fur. Now that pup would grow strong, and those who had tried to destroy him would learn the true meaning of fear. Veratis glanced once more at Corvan, standing vigil beside her in the moonlit nursery. He caught her gaze and held it, a silent acknowledgement of everything that had passed between them and everything that was yet to come. "We should both try to rest," she said softly. "Tomorrow, the real work begins." "The real work," he repeated, hunting shadows, protecting my son from enemies I cannot see. You will not be hunting alone. Corvin nodded slowly, and for the first time since she had arrived at Thornwood Keep, Veratus saw something like peace settle over his features. Not the peace of resolution, there was too much unfinished for that, but the peace of knowing that the fight ahead would not be faced in solitude. "Good night, Veratis," he said quietly. "Good night, Alpha." He left the nursery, his footsteps fading down the corridor. Veratis settled deeper into her chair, pulling a blanket over her shoulders as the night grew cold. Outside, the wind whispered through the mountains, carrying secrets from distant lands. Somewhere beyond those peaks, their enemies gathered strength. Somewhere in the darkness, Seraphine plotted her next move. But here, in this small room, a child slept soundly for the first time in 18 months. His father had remembered how to love him, and alone Omega had found something worth protecting. The curse was broken. The story was just beginning.